eventually you see the results, and the results become the motivation again.
Right.
And then you become almost addicted to the discipline.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe them as a person who's never done it before.
Yeah.
Because how could a 19 or 20-year-old kid go to some place he's never been before and then come back $100,000 richer?
It's funny, it's easier for me to like do a set of like heavy squats or like hop in a cold shower. It's easier for me to do that than just to like get myself up and out of bed. It's just my thing. It's my thing to struggle with. And some people will say like, that's so stupid. Like everybody since the dawn of man has gotten out of their bed in the morning. But then those same people will say, I don't want to go to the gym. Like that's uncomfortable, you know? And it's like, and so to me, it's like, oh, this logic doesn't add up. Like, come on, just do it. Just eat the right food. Just go get your workout in. Just like go study. It's not that hard. But to them, it is. It's like, what, that version of yourself, what did they have that you don't have now? It's just that they had the vision like fresh in their mind. That consistency over time, your brain just learns so much better.
It's like you can hit the gym for 10 hours.
Yeah.
But if you hit the gym for an hour a day for 10 days in a row, that's where you're gonna notice the difference.
Yeah. Take a break, you come back the next day, and it's like magically you've just improved. It's like overnight. I don't know if my socks were gonna be in. Unfortunately, I wore Shrek socks today.
Well, fortunately, you mean. Hello, I am Matthew Goldbaum, Matty G. As you know, welcome to The Grind and the Glory. I am a 20-year-old innovator, creator, motivator who is obsessed with Jesus and just creating in general. I love to help other people, inspire them, and encourage them to make good choices. My goals are to lead the younger generation to righteousness and to make good decisions throughout their lives to help them financially. And I hope to do so through social media for life, or as long as the Lord lets me. So,
yeah, and I'm Tommy. I'm a 21-year-old college student up here in Utah, going to BYU. I help other people on their fitness journey, mainly building muscle and losing body fat and things like that, but also increasing their confidence in themselves and helping them grow as much as I can. I love music. I play piano. I'm studying entrepreneurship in school, so I love small business growth and trying out new ideas and validating new business ideas, talking to people, things like that. And yeah, I'm super happy to be here and talk to you, Matt.
So today we kind of just wanted to talk about a couple of main ideas that we kind of think make the world go around. It's building discipline, purpose, personal growth, and living out a fulfilling life. So because of the subject matter, I was talking to Tommy just a little bit, and Tommy's the kind of individual that embodies all those characteristics to me. And so I figured that it'd be awesome to have him here so we can kind of get a little bit of insight on how those things and aspects have shaped his life, and just kind of have a dialogue carrying it forward so that we can build on these ideas and hopefully inspire you to move forward a little bit more in these categories in your own life. So
yeah, thanks, Matt. And I really appreciate that. And it's something that's a constant journey for me as well, but it's very flattering that you can recognize that, and really appreciate that. It's something that you're great at as well. The organization you have in your life and like the goals that you create for yourself are very high achieving goals, you know? And I'm sure you can agree with this, that the higher you set your goals, it just pushes you further and further to get there, right? It's better to set a goal that's too high and to not reach it, right, than to set a goal that's so small that it barely pushes you. I think it kind of comes back to the concept of pushing you out of your comfort zone all the time. All the other goals and growth that you have in your life really stems from what your purpose is, where you find your meaning, and the vision you have for your future. So what are some things that you would do in your life to like, how do you see the vision for your future? You know, like thinking of creating goals, like the first step, I usually try to create a vision for myself and picture my future. Like what do you do for yourself?
yeah, that's really important. I think it's funny, actually, I'm in a student development class at BYU right now, and that's one of the first units is setting a vision, or it's like she's like, create this vision board.
Yeah.
And it's like, do 1 year, do 5 years, do 5+ years, and then it's just like map it out.
Yeah.
And honestly, that makes you think of all the different stages of life that you're going to live, and it's like, what do you want to accomplish by the time you're in this situation? And so I kind of think about that on a day-to-day basis, and I think about it on a weekly basis. I use a calendar, and that kind of helps me organize my goals. My brother uses a to-do list. He doesn't really like to look at and put it into a time increment.
Right.
But for myself, I think it's interesting. Humans, I think it's funny because, you know, you'll be like, oh, I'm going to go do this job, right? And I'm going to get paid so and so dollars for the amount of time that I put in per hour, right?
Yeah.
And so it's always just this time for money exchange. And that's interesting because there are a lot of people, you know, you grow up and you hear time is money, and I don't think you realize it until you're that person that's actually like set to provide, or you need to provide for yourself. Then you start to understand that time really is money.
Right.
And so when it comes to these goals that I work toward, I realize that, you know, I want to make a lot of money, and I might not make a lot of money for the time I'm investing right now. But if I put more time into this now, I'll put less time into it later and make more money. And so the exchange isn't like exact 1-for-1 hour for $15 or hour for $35, but it's
Right.
I put in these hours, and it's like maybe I'm not yielding anything now, but hopefully at one point when I get a little bit later down the road, I'll have to put in 0 and I'll be able to get 100.
Right.
Or I'll put in 1 and I'll get 1,000.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's the idea of like recognizing that there is purpose in every action that you take. So it doesn't necessarily matter if you're doing something crazy right now, or if you're going to do something consistent over the next year or so.
Right.
As long as you recognize that you are trying to get somewhere and you do need to work toward that. And that's kind of what gives me that purpose day to day and helps me guide my goals and my vision, is just like, I have somewhere I want to be. And so what can I do now to get there?
Right. Yeah. You mentioned a couple of things there that I kind of want to unpack. Like the fact that you can work like every day for a year, for example, and you said like you're not getting paid by the hour. So it's like you're building something bigger. You're working on a project that could take like 5 years, right? And you see this all the time in like entrepreneurship. It's like, okay, it's going to take 5 years until the business is profitable. And it's like, really? Like, so we're going to work for 5 years and just not get paid any money? You know, or as the investor, it's like, I'm not going to see a return on the investment for 5 years straight. I'm going to pay all these people to do all these things. And we're not used to hearing that, right? Because it's like you said, it's like, oh, I want to work for $20 an hour. So I worked 10 hours a day. So I'm going to make $200. But if you're starting your own business, you're not going to see that, you know, or you're learning a new skill. You're not going to just have the skill in 10 hours, you know, you're not going to see it like, it's not linear. And we want to think so linear in our heads. We just want it to be like a graph that just goes straight up, you know.
We want to get back to the time equals money.
Yeah, like time equals money, yeah. So 10 hours, $20 an hour, $200, you know. Or I put 10 hours into this skill, so I'm going to get like 10 hours worth of the skill, and you don't see it immediately, you know. Or like I go to the gym for 10 hours, so like I'm going to see a difference. You're not going to see the difference immediately. And it's so much more of the time, it's exponential. It's like you work and you work and you work and you work, and you don't see any progress, and then eventually just boom, you just like this massive spike out of nowhere. And so coming back to the vision, where you said you have to think longer term, like think in terms of years, right? Like, where do I see myself a year from now? Where do I see myself 5 years from now? If you can't think that long, if you can't think in terms of 5 years, you're not going to be able to set a goal that's big enough. If you're only thinking in terms of like weeks, it's like you can't accomplish that much in 5 weeks. Like if you're going to set a 5-week goal, you might get somewhere, but it's going to take longer than that to take off.
Right. I think that's a big point too, is like when you think about goals or something, like let's say that you wanted to start this business, right? And we're talking about, even you mentioned the gym. It's like you can hit the gym for 10 hours.
Yeah.
But if you hit the gym for an hour a day for 10 days in a row, that's where you're going to notice the difference. Yeah. Because it's not just the gym that makes the difference. It's the time.
Yeah, the rest.
You need the rest. You need the refueling. You need to eat right.
Yeah.
You need to keep your mind right. You need to sleep well. All those sorts of things, they factor into it. And so when you think about the amount of time that you're putting into something, let's say you're putting in 5 weeks, 5-week goals, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have a year goal behind that, if you don't have a year-long goal or a 10-year plan or a 5-year plan sitting behind that, then your 5 weeks doesn't really mean anything, and it's not really guided. Because maybe it's not realistic for what you said, that 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and then again, you might just be like changing up things every 5 weeks, right? If you don't have like an end goal in mind. Another thing that you mentioned with like consistency and like the rest time, this is another thing that's like, it's a weird concept to think about, but this doesn't even, you apply this to the gym and like building muscle, right? You need time to rest. And that's kind of an easy one to picture. But there's skills that you have to learn that just take time as well. Like you can only speed up the learning process so much, right? When you're learning something new. And it's weird that the human brain works like this, where like, I'm sure you felt this, in every student or every athlete or every musician's felt this, where you work on something for like hours and hours in the same day, right? Like you work 10 hours straight. And after a few hours, you start to feel like you're just not making any more progress. It's like, I just feel like I'm getting worse at this. Like I don't see the skill, like I'm not getting any better. And you're like, I'm just gonna take a break for a bit. Take a break, you come back the next day, and it's like magically you've just improved. It's like overnight. And it's like I wasn't doing anything. It's because your brain needs time to process it and like to think about it in the background. And so that time to just be thinking about things in the background, like studying, even study habits. I've totally seen this being a college student. If you can't just study, if you've got a test tomorrow, let's say, you can't just study 10 hours before the day of the test, right? If you study 1 day or 1 hour a day every day for 10 days, you'd be so much better. And we don't want it to be like that. Like we just want to grind it out as quickly as possible. But that consistency over time, your brain just learns so much better. And it's helped me to learn new skills so much quicker. Once you understand that it's so much better to just be consistent and just like break things up. And it's a pain in the butt, right? You'd much rather just grind something out for 10 hours in one day than like break it up 20 minutes today, 20 minutes tomorrow, just be consistent. But that is so much more effective.
Within 24 hours of like attending your class, if you don't review or study your material, you forget 90% of it.
Right.
And so I think it's a similar thing when you think about the gym, right? Let's say you hit your exercise and it's an hour.
Yeah.
And you get that full hour in and you're locked in. You have that exercise, and so let's say 24 hours go by, and now you apply that same principle, only 10% of that workout stuck, right? So let's say you did it again the next day, right? And so you have 10%, you lose 90%, but then you get another 10% and you lose 90%. And then eventually it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, but it doesn't go 10 to 100.
Right.
And it doesn't get to 100 every time, but then
Right.
your percentages increase also.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like you continue to get bigger and stronger, but continually day by day, it's like that pump goes away. And I feel like there's this pump influence where you're hyped because you just got a good workout in.
Yeah.
But then you leave the gym and then it's like your body is not in that workout mode anymore.
Totally. Yeah. And same thing with learning any new skill. It's like you bring in all this knowledge, and then like you said, if you don't review it, you only remember like 10% of it, and you got to keep coming back every day to review that. Bringing this back to the vision overall, like we said earlier, like thinking in terms of years, this is something that I like to do with my coaching clients. When I think, okay, what are your goals? I usually ask, like, where do you see your body changing in the next 6 months? Like, where do you see even things as deep as like your relationships? Like, how are your relationships going to change? How are people going to view you? How is your confidence going to change as we change your body and your habits and your lifestyle and your mindset? Like, where do you want to see yourself? And like, if you just take a second and like picture yourself 6 months from now or a year from now, and just like every day or every few days, realistically, if you could just take a minute and just picture yourself being like the ideal version of yourself, right? Like you, but 6 months from now, it's like you, but just 10% better. And if you can picture that in your head, it's like every day you see the vision. And a lot of people, when they lose like motivation, right? We say like motivation, and you've kind of got to define the word. It's like, what do you really mean by motivation? Like, what do you mean by discipline, really? I think when people are like, I think this is what people really mean when they say, I lost motivation, or like, they're like, Tommy, help me be more motivated. I think they're saying, help me see my vision. It's like, help me remember my vision for myself. It's like, all you got to do is remind them of the vision that they had. Because like at one point you were super motivated. It's like at one point you were like, oh, I totally got this. I'm going to hit the goal. I'm going to grind every day. It's like, that version of yourself, what did they have that you don't have now? It's just that they had the vision like fresh in their mind. They had just thought of it. You had just written down the goal. It's like when they're the most motivated, right? It's like when you first write down the goal. And it's like you picture it in your head and you're like, oh, I see myself a year from now. I'm crushing it. Like, I'm in such great shape. My relationships are amazing. Like, my relationship with my kids is amazing. I made all this time to spend with my wife, or like, I got the job promotion. I've got all this money saved up so I can buy a house. I'm doing good in school. It's like, that is the person that you're trying to be, right? It's just a better version of you. And so when you get discouraged, I mean, because this happens to me all the time, where I'm like, I don't even want to work on this project anymore. Like, I just want to abandon this goal. I think sometimes people think that I just like never lose like motivation, or it's like I never want to give up on the goals. It's like everyone wants to give up at some point.
Absolutely.
Right? It's just how good are you at reminding yourself of the vision and keeping the end goal in mind.
So then to expand on this a little bit more too, I love what you said. I want to connect it to a scripture real quick.
Yeah.
It's where there is no vision, the people perish, right?
Yeah.
Proverbs 29:18.
Yeah.
And I think that's very similar to what you're talking about. What is motivation? People without motivation, they do struggle. But that's the thing. This is the important thing to remember. And I'm going to apply this back to the gospel because I feel like this is kind of like my forte here. But when it comes to Jesus Christ and his suffering, you think about his motivation to begin with, right? Jesus Christ had his heavenly Father with him the entire way, right? Then he gets to the Garden of Gethsemane, and then it becomes his Father's obligation to leave him be, right? To let him endure the suffering independently, because this is something that he knows he has to do. And so at this instance, Jesus Christ still has his motivation, but it's completely different because his Father's not cheering him on. So now he's not just running on sheer motivation constantly, but he has to run on discipline. And I think that's the difference when we talk about motivation and you talking, like people saying you just seem like you're always motivated. It's not that you're always motivated,
right?
But you are always disciplined,
right?
You always have an understanding of what you're supposed to do. It's duty, right?
Yeah.
You always do it.
Totally.
And you have this obligation and you follow it. And that's just how it is. And I think that's the important thing to remember, that a lot of people don't actually keep in the forefront of their mind. It doesn't matter how motivated you are, but it just matters how disciplined and consistent you can be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, the discipline and consistency. It's amazing what you can accomplish if you're just consistent for like 10 years straight, right? I mean, almost anyone, I think about intelligence and like being smart, right? Like we tend to say that people are born naturally gifted or talented, or they're smarter and they're just naturally better, right? And most of the times it's really not the case. The case is that they just practiced more, right? They just were more consistent. Like going back to piano, it's something that I was always drawn to, but like I practiced piano every single day for 12 years. Like, I mean, I skipped a week when I had to like go out of town on vacation, right? But even as a 15-year-old high school boy, which is like, there's not a lot of 15-year-old boys out there that want to practice classical piano pieces. That's not very common. And there were so many days where I was just like, I feel like I'm making no progress. Like, I just don't want to do this. Like, I feel like there's not much room to improve, because you have to stick to it for so long that there's some days where you really just feel like you just don't want to do it. And people will be like, oh, you play music, that must be so fun. Like, it's not fun. Like, sometimes it's fun, but practicing every single day for hours, and like you're playing, in this case, you're playing the same piece every day, sometimes for like 6 months. It's like you're running through the same piece, the same notes, the same chords, and like you're just practicing it again and again and again and again. If you ever sit in on a piano lesson that's very high level, you'll hear the teacher say, okay, that was good, again, like again, okay, again, and you'll play the same like phrase, the same like 5-second phrase, like a couple measures. You'll just play it again. And your teacher will say, okay, good, but like a little bit louder, or a little bit more, make it more pretty, use a little bit less pedal. Okay, do it again, but more pedal. Okay, again, but less pedal. It's just, you're like tweaking little things, and it's so tedious. But then over time, you start to realize like, wow, wait, it sounds so good now, and I don't know why. It's like now I can play so beautifully, and I don't know why. And it's because you practiced all those grueling hours for so long that it just added up. And now people are like, wow, you play so beautifully. You have such a nice tone. Like, you're just so gifted. And it's like, well, to an extent, I mean, I've been playing this piece for 3 years, or I've been practicing this technique for years. And that's where it comes in. And you don't really realize that when someone just has been practicing for so long. It's like they're just so gifted. It's like, I don't even know how they do that. And it's just because they probably practiced it for such a long time and they were consistent. I think there's a lot of people who have become the best in their field, like the best at what they do, who were not necessarily born like more intelligent. They weren't smarter than everybody else. I think they really did just work their way to the top, and they got so good at doing the one thing that they do because they just were consistent and practiced it for such a long time.
it does compound, and it does make a big difference. And I think that
compounding. Yeah.
I think when you consider the idea of consistency or discipline in general, these people that go without motivation for an extended period of time, if they continue to be disciplined and consistent, eventually you see the results, and the results become the motivation again.
Right.
And then you become almost addicted to the discipline and the consistency. And that's honestly what I kind of saw when I was doing 75 hard, because they say it takes something around 70 days to form a habit, and that's why 75 hard even exists, right? Yeah. And so I get 25 days in, and the process just became easy. And then I became addicted to the process. And it's like, at first it's super grueling. At first you're like, why am I doing this? It's just because I'm trying to push myself. But then you get to that point where you're like, you know what? I'm seeing results. Yeah. And then you're motivated to continue. And it doesn't even it's really not even the discipline and consistency anymore. As long as you just stick past that one window that really does suck, then you become a completely different person and you fall in love with everything about it. And I honestly think that it plays a huge role in confidence too. Yeah. I think a lot of people who have more motivation and discipline and consistency in their lives are significantly more confident, right? You think about this hub of people that live here in Provo, right? And all the people that are successful starting their own business, they have a lot of structure in their life. Yeah. But it's because they stick to what they know they're supposed to do consistently. Yeah. And then when these people are seeing success, they become even more successful. It's the idea that when we play poker, we were just playing Hold'em, and it's, the rich get richer. Why do the rich get richer? Because your poker face becomes a lot more convincing when you keep winning hands. Yeah. People are scared of you. Yeah. People don't want to play against you and lose. And so it's harder to beat those people because they're winning and because they're motivated, they're consistent, and they're disciplined. Even if you lose a hand, showing the whole table that doesn't get to you makes a huge difference, right?
If we think of getting 1% better every day, for example, think of if you got 1% better every day for a year, you've probably heard this before. In your head, you think, okay, 1% every day, there's 365 days in the year. So I'm going to be 365% better, right? So I'm going to be 3.6x. Okay, that's pretty good. I'll be 3 times better at the end of the year. But that's not how the compounding works, right? It comes out to 37x? Yeah. Or something like that? 37 times better if you just got 1% better every day of the year.
Because it doesn't go from 1 plus 1 plus 1. It goes
it's
1 plus 2, or 1 times 2 times 4 times whatever.
Yeah. And so a lot of people don't understand the concept of the compounding, right? And it's like the exponential growth again, right? And if you kept doing that for 10 years and then 20 years, I don't know what the number is, but it's probably 1,000x, right? It's just that exponential growth and the compounding.
Yeah, I read The Compound Effect.
Oh yeah, same. Yeah, agree. Yeah,
I love the part in the book. It shares a story of 2 men, and it's funny because they're losing weight, right? And one of them's eating 100 less calories a day, and the other one's eating normal. Yeah. And by the end of a year, one loses 30 pounds and the other gains 10. Yeah. And it's you don't think it makes a huge difference. Yeah. You don't think 100 calories. What even is that? 100 calories? Yeah. That's
usually barely noticeable.
That's maybe you have a soda every day and you decide to cut it out entirely for the year. Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, 1 soda. Man, if everyone cut out just soda from their diet, I can't tell you how big of a difference it would make. What's interesting is when you talk about the discipline, it's funny because there's certain things that some people we struggle with different things. We have different dragons to slay in a sense. So for some people that's the hardest part is cutting out the soda. Or for somebody, losing the weight is the hardest part, right? It's restricting the calories. I'm someone who was always super skinny. I could not put on weight. So for me, I had to there are times where this is unhealthy, so I'm not recommending it, but just force feeding the food and always packing in more. And it's a totally different dragon to slay. But for me, the discipline came to okay, it's time to eat. I'm not hungry, but I'm gonna eat anyways. Or that's my goal. My goal is to gain weight. I have to eat more. Whereas, let's say your goal is to lose weight, then you've got to restrict it, and that could be just as difficult. So yeah, different dragons to slay, for sure. With discipline. One that I've always struggled with is being very vulnerable, but just getting up in the morning. That is my dragon, bro. It's just getting up in the morning. It's funny. It's easier for me to do a set of heavy squats or hop in a cold shower. It's easier for me to do that than just to get myself up and out of bed. And I don't. It's just my thing. It's my thing to struggle with. And some people will say that's so stupid. Everybody since the dawn of man has gotten out of their bed in the morning. But then those same people will say, I don't want to go to the gym. That's uncomfortable, And it's
And so to me, it's like, oh, this logic doesn't add up. Like, come on, just do it. Just eat the right food. Just go get your workout in. Just like go study. It's not that hard. But to them, it is. You know. And then again, to me, I have different struggles. So it's funny how we all have different challenges to face.
Yeah, absolutely. True.
Yeah.
I think that everybody's got their own beasts that they're fighting in their lives. But at the end of the day, I think the thing that changes everything for everyone is the smile that they can or can't put on their face.
Yeah.
Because I think because it kind of like we talked about motivation and consistency and discipline and all these things, it's so much easier for somebody who's happy to accomplish the same tasks as someone who's sad.
Right.
Like you put the same task in front of two people, one's happy and one's sad.
Yeah.
And the happy person will get that task done likely even better, if not totally just faster. Just because doing things with a smile or doing things with the half a glass full instead of the half glass empty makes miles of a difference.
Yeah.
Where do you think that comes from? Like, why are some people more willing to put work in or have like a positive outlook? What can people do to, I guess, get that more positive outlook on life when they feel just discouraged?
I honestly think it just kind of comes to hope in the result, hope in the outcome, hope in the process. I actually have a funny story. I think you saw the videos on Instagram I was doing where I asked girls on dates for $5.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because the first one that I did, I was so nervous, and I think you can like clearly tell how nervous I am in this video. And it's interesting because I realized after the fact that I had no confidence in the fact that she'd say yes.
Yeah.
She was so pretty, and I was just so scared.
Yeah.
And I was like, she's not gonna say yes. And so when she did, I was like, oh my gosh, my life was like, ooh,
Yeah.
that was crazy. I did not expect that.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to this specific interaction, if I would have had optimism or at least hope or confidence in myself, like hope in the outcome that would be yes, or confidence in myself that she would say yes, then that would have changed my interaction or the way that I interacted with her.
Yeah.
And so I think it's the same way when it comes to these dragons that we're slaying in our lives, is if we approach them with the belief that we'll conquer them, or that the belief that you're not going to let this defeat you, then it won't, or it will defeat you less.
Yeah, and it mainly stems from a fear of rejection, right? It's like the fear that they're gonna say no. Like, what is the worst thing that could really happen? Like, I usually like to think of what's the worst case scenario, because of course I've been scared to do things like that, ask girls out or do whatever. And in one of my classes this last week, we actually had a rejection challenge. So we had to go do 5 things where we were pretty dang sure that the person was going to say no. We had to make like outrageous requests and do a rejection challenge. And so it's something as simple as like, I went and got Korean barbecue and I asked if I could get like a 100% off discount. And they were like, no. And of course they said no, you know? But you get so nervous to say it. It's like, well, I can't ask for free food. Like, that's so weird, you know? And like, what is the worst thing they're going to say? Like, are you going to die? Probably not. So if you're not going to die, then things are probably going to be okay. And the worst thing they say was no. And they said they couldn't do it. And it's like, okay, on to the next one. And what's funny is people will do this, and every now and then you actually do get free food. You know, you just never know the outcome. And going back to like taking advantage of opportunities and things like that, and you can even apply this to dating. Yeah, it's you miss the 100% of the shots you don't take. So you might as well take the shot. Yeah.
That's actually super valid.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to rejection, that's a lot of people's biggest fear, and it's not just in like a dating world, but I think in general, rejection is just an overall fear that people do have in a lot of things. Because when you think about, like, if I'm going to sell door-to-door pest control, what is the one thing that stops people from continuing and finishing out the summer? It's that fear of rejection on the next door. Yeah. Right? You don't usually, like, people that aren't successful in that space are the people that are getting discouraged, and the people that can't knock the hours, or the people that can't master the pitch, right? And it's usually because they're getting nervous because the person that they're about to talk to is going to say no. And the important thing to remember is that you have to approach the situation, even if they are going to say no, like they're going to say yes.
Yeah.
And if you treat it like that, then I think naturally they're a lot more inclined to say yes because you believe in them and in you, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that it becomes this like thing of teamwork where you have to understand that the person that you are interacting with is just as much affected by what you say as you are.
Right.
where it's like a mutual exchange, or like you're responsible for the outcome. If you take responsibility for the outcome,
Yeah.
like let's go back to what you're talking about when you wake up in the morning. Who else can do that? Nash can walk in your room and he can shake you and wake
No,
you
yeah,
up,
you can have a
right?
family member like drag you out of bed, but
Right.
yeah.
But is that going to give you the personal win or the confidence in yourself? Like at the end of the day, you're going to say, my brother had to get me out of bed today.
Right.
And
Yeah.
not me. Right?
Totally. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you're going to say, like, maybe that's the thing that motivates you. You're going to say, I'm going to be the one to get myself out
Yeah.
of bed today, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many things where you can't have somebody else do it for you. Like you can't have somebody else go do your workout for you, or you can't have somebody else eat for you or diet for you. It's like it's something that you have to do. And that's what makes it so valuable. Like if you could hire somebody else to do it for you, or I mean, I guess you can get surgery, people will just get surgery to alter how they look. But it's not real, and you can tell that it's not real. Like you can tell when someone got a BBL or like when someone got plastic surgery, and you can tell that's not real. And it's like you really chose to just spend money to shortcut it instead of just put in, honestly, instead of just put in the work that would have gotten it for you. And people respect it so much more when they know that you actually did it, right? You didn't shortcut it. You didn't just pay somebody the money to save all the time or save the effort.
I think there's a lot of credit that goes out to the process or people that accomplish it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard thing about like, my mind goes to just so many, like it's the same places consistently, but I think of these door-to-door people that are on social media.
Uh-huh.
It's hard to believe them as a person who's never done it before.
Yeah.
Because how could a 19 or 20-year-old kid go to some place he's never been before and then come back $100,000 richer after 4 months? Doesn't make sense, right?
Doesn't make sense.
It really, and like in a standard world's formula, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But if you have a personal connection or a personal relationship with these people or an understanding of the industry in general, you know that that's what it does with the right amount of work and putting effort to the process.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about this idea of like people want to take the shortcut, it's the kind of people that believe so strongly in shortcuts, like you can't put yourself to the process, that don't believe in these people that can go and do this and succeed.
Right.
Because they believe, oh, well, I couldn't find a shortcut to do that.
Right.
So there's no way he could have found that shortcut.
Yeah. Right. It's like if there's not a shortcut, it's not possible. There's no way that person actually worked that hard or that person actually did all that. Like it's unfathomable. Yeah.
It's almost even a knee-jerk reaction because you're just like, you're in disbelief that somebody that is maybe in a very similar situation as yourself doing something really, really crazy for someone your age.
Yeah.
And so you're like, how did they accomplish that?
Right.
And then you start to say they didn't accomplish that.
Right.
Because it's of
I
insecurity.
couldn't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't do it. How could they? Right.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that's a really dangerous mindset to get into. Also, because I think it's honestly the opposite of optimism. Because when you're talking about getting yourself out of bed in the morning or finding a reason to go about your day, it's discouraging to see someone else in your same shoes more successful than you when you tend to be yourself a successful person.
Yeah.
Or like you feel validated by your own definition of success consistently.
Yeah.
But then you see other people around you that are more successful in the game of comparison.
Yeah. Yeah. You do compare. And the other thing is that subconsciously you know that you could have done it. So you're kind of just upset with yourself and you're just projecting it onto other people. You start to think, well, this person got this and there must be a reason why I can't do what they can do. Like I have an excuse. Like I just can't do the same thing that they can do. They must have cheated. They must have shortcutted it. And otherwise there's no possible way that they could have gotten it done. Yeah, like you said.